Good evening. I am so pleased to welcome you to COVID-19 and the classroom. My name is Evangeline Chima. I am the founder and executive director of Black Mentorship Inc., BMI, an organization dedicated to the empowerment of Black professionals in Canada. We exist to elevate the personal and professional advancement of the Black community and to build a better, more equitable workforce. If you are a parent or have a loved one in school, the question in your mind is, how safe is it in the classroom in the age of COVID-19? Every morning, many parents are worried about sending their children off to school. And when they come back from school, there are so many regimens they have to go through in order to keep everyone safe. For those learning from home virtually, the challenge is not different. Across the country and around the world, really, there are new learning models that have been put in place. There are back-to-school COVID-19 rules, student groupings, distancing, masks, hand sanitizer, a reality for all schools to adjust to, as if our world is not hectic enough. Millions of miles away in my bad country, Nigeria, the youths have come together to demand for social justice, a first of its kind in recent years. We are indeed in unprecedented times. How do we keep our head above water with everything that is going on around us? Erica Jones said, and I quote, "I have not ceased being fearful, but I have ceased to let fear control me." We must keep moving, finding answers, courage, and the determination to get to the next stage. Before we begin, let us acknowledge that Halton, as we know it today, is rich in the history and modern traditions of many First Nations and the Métis, from the lands of the Anishinaabe to the Atawantrum, the Haudenosaunee, and the Métis. These lands surrounding the Great Lakes are steeped in indigenous history. As we gather today in these treaty lands, we are in solidarity with our indigenous brothers and sisters to honor and respect the four directions: lands, waters, plants, animals, and ancestors that walked before us, and all of the wonderful elements of creatures that exist. We acknowledge and thank the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation for being stewards of this traditional territory. A few important elements. Please be informed that this session is being recorded. We will begin by first asking our panelists the questions that some of you, the BMI community, have sent to us. For other questions that you would like the panelists to address, kindly use the Q&A window and put in your questions, and our web host will ensure that your questions get to the panelists. I am humbled that we have amazing panelists who are open to share their knowledge and experiences in these defining unprecedented times. Thank you, panelists, for being willing to share your know-hows with us. And we're going to start I will briefly talk to you guys a little bit about all of the panelists, and then I will hand over to them. So I'll start with Aoda Guidelines. Aoda Guidelines is a teacher, a mother, a wife, a part of our community, Igbo community, and my friend. She is one of the first people that joined BMI as a mentor. Immediately, she realized the work we are doing to inspire and promote Black professionals. Her philosophy in life is do unto others as you would like them to do unto you. She has a passion for growing community and is a teacher, creating environment where her students reach the heights of their potential is her mission. Ada, please introduce yourself.
Good evening, everyone. I'm glad that you all could be part of this webinar. It's an honor, a privilege to be here speaking with you about my experiences. Thank you for giving some time of your day to join us. I'm a teacher with the Toronto Catholic District School Board. I've been a teacher for 12 years now, and in my role has changed over the years. I've taught science, senior level science, chemistry, biology, and I have now taken on a role as a student success teacher, which means that I am supporting students who are at high risk in the community, providing an extra layer of support as a caring adult, monitoring their classes, liaising with community resources, and just helping these students who struggle the most to make it through high school. And I'm also a pioneer teacher for a course that I started in my school 2 years ago, which is the Mindfulness and Social Emotional Learning course. And this course has been so helpful to my school community because it teaches skills to the students that they need for outside of school and even while they are in school. And so we're teaching them how to be self-aware, how to manage their emotions, how to build relationships, how to make responsible decisions, and then also how to be able to calm themselves through life stresses. So we do mindfulness, meditation, and it's been such a great addition to my school community. And I'm glad that I've been able to bring that to bear there. So I'm also a mother of 3 daughters, all in elementary school, and a wife. So I have my plate full.
Thank you so much. That's awesome. Charmaine Rutherford, I was fortunate to get introduced to Charmaine by a wonderful lady, Sue Douglas, who volunteers with BMI, and she is so relentless in supporting our goals. When I called Charmaine, we had a long chat about mentoring, why it matters, and about supporting students, parents, and professionals. Charmaine, please say hi and introduce yourself. We can't hear you, you're on mute.
Okay, we'll start that again. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for that introduction. Absolutely. Evangeline, I just met you a short while ago. I am so happy that you asked me to be a part of this panelist. Thank you, everybody, for joining. My name is Charmaine Rutherford, and I have been a part of training and development and human resources for over 20 years. My passion and my love is training and development, which kind of grew into mentoring and coaching as well. But in human resources, I'm able to use all of those skills. I too am a mother of 2 boys, 9 and 19, and I am a wife as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And talking about being a wife, how lucky can one get? You get connected to an amazing person, and then they turn around and introduce you to their significant other. Thank you. So when I heard about the work that Jeffrey is doing with the school board, raising awareness about subconscious bias, how to respond, mentoring students, and how to use language to accomplish success, I knew he had to be part of this discussion. And I said, Charmaine, please, can you tell your husband? And so I'm so happy he said yes. Please introduce yourself, Jeffrey.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Jeffrey Rutherford. Evangeline, thank you for inviting me to be part of this panel. I really appreciate it. Thank you for clarifying. Charmaine is my wife, not my sister, just so you know. I've been involved heavily with Black mentorship, and likewise in terms of just curriculum across the board as far as Black focused curriculum since I was a very young man. So I mean, from when I was a young man, I was part of the Black Youth Congress of Mississauga University. I joined different groups there and always participating in to some degree as far as trying to just do better in the community. Right now, I've been running a couple of businesses, but one of my businesses is Real Talk Learning. So Real Talk Learning was originally an idea that started off going into schools. And what I did was I went into schools, and my target really was young Black males, young Black youth, particularly because of myself and what my own experiences going through the system. But likewise, in terms of being the father of two Black males as well too. And you know, even one as a teenager, different challenges to school, different challenges with society. So I basically have developed specialized programming that focuses on a number of things. One is self-development and success by goal setting. And likewise, within the school the schools where I work, was to go in and set up this programming so that not only would I help young people kind of focus more on academics and likewise on themselves, but also to mentor other young people. So that was another part of what I do. I have a very strong focus on history, particularly Black history. And I use my knowledge of history to kind of bring to light not only some of the challenges that we face, but likewise in terms of the solutions, so that we can kind of get over the humps that we face every day. So with that being said, I'm also creating online learning material right now in the process of, I've been working with Peel District School Board, Toronto District School Board, and as well as a Peel Catholic School Board as well for the last 4 years in terms of developing programming. And as time kind of goes on, I'll become more involved in that as well too. Glad to be here.
Thank you so much. Carol, Carol, welcome back. I get very excited when I have the pleasure of welcoming back someone who have participated in our panel. It is a testament to their unwavering commitment to support the Black professionals. And Carol, I have to say thank you so much. We have had series of talks on how we can work together in supporting students and entry-level professionals to be the best they can be and to shatter that glass ceiling. You know, I'm so excited to have you back on, Carol. Say hi, hello to everyone.
Well, thank you, Evangeline. It is absolutely my pleasure and my privilege to be part of this work and to have met you and to contemplate the ways that we can work together to advance equity, diversity, and inclusion through Sheridan, but more broadly. So I've been in post-secondary education for over 30 years now, and I feel immensely grateful to have spent such a long career at what I consider just transformative work, and having the privilege of changing lives, of watching and supporting in any way that I can young people unfold and emerge. It has been extraordinary to be part of that world over the last 6 months in particular. So everyone here is slipping and sliding and coping and trying to get footing in what is unprecedented disruption. As the Vice President, Student Experience and Enrollment Management, I am, as you can imagine, quite preoccupied with how students are managing. I have the opportunity for the next few months to also serve as Sheridan's provost. And so that gives me the opportunity to delve into the academic challenges that they're facing during the pandemic. Sheridan has launched a relatively new strategic plan, and one of the core pillars of that plan is equity, diversity, and inclusion, and it compels us to take even this circumstance and view it through the lens of equity and view it through the lens of disparate and disproportional impacts of what's happening right now, and to think carefully, deliberately about how we take this unprecedented circumstance and actually try to leverage it for change. Disruption brings opportunities, and even when we are stressed and overwhelmed and frankly tired, which I'm sure many of you are, we do have good space for work. And I'm grateful again to have found a wonderful partner in Evangeline to do some of that work. So I'm going to add, because the others have, I am a mother of two. I have a son and a daughter. One is 30 and the other one is 27. So they are long past struggling with their academic journeys and facing other challenges with COVID right now. But of course, a privilege to watch them as young adults. So thank you again. And it's a pleasure to meet all of you.
Thank you, Carol. Absolutely. Once a mother, always a mother.
Indeed.
Our kids never really, outgrow us, thankfully. Okay, thank you so much, everybody. Without further ado, let's jump right into it. Topic of today, COVID-19 and the classroom. This pandemic has heightened inequities in our society that have been ignored for a long time. We've been suddenly given an opportunity to create new learnings, and that hasn't been easy. But we also are tasked with providing space for choice and expanding access to learning. What is the biggest challenge you have had to overcome, Charmaine? I'm coming to you with that question, Charmaine. What has been your biggest challenge so far?
With regards to COVID-19?
COVID-19, coping with your children, going to school or staying home,
So I think the biggest challenge for me, so my eldest is in post-secondary, so there isn't a lot of going into school. I think for me, the biggest was the elementary portion and going back to school. I think for me, I was more reluctant than my husband for my son to go back into the school. And although he heard me talk about my anxiety and my uncertainty, he was so happy to go back to school, as many kids were. He was excited as it was an adventure because his school close to our house had a fire last year. So he had to now go on a bus. And I think he forgot everything except he's going on a bus and it's a new adventure and he wants to go back to see his friends. So I think for me, it was trying to balance my anxiety as a mother and the things that I hear, and being frontline at my workplace, being the only HR person, the point of contact, and hearing all of the things that I am dealing with. And we never closed during the whole pandemic. So hearing that and my anxiety was very different, and then trying not to put that on him.
That's
allowing him to have that space and that time to not feel what his mother feels, and still allow him to grow and have new experiences, irregardless of what is going on.
That is so important that you mentioned, us allowing our children to continue experiencing life as normal as they can in these difficult days that we have. Jeffrey, I'm going to come to you with a question around equity in schools. COVID-19, no doubt, has opened many gaps in learning, and while there are plenty of programs that work to close these opportunity gaps, what additional learning opportunities do you think we can provide students and parents outside of the traditional school learning?
Right. Well, I think firstly, the thing that we have to note is that what COVID did, I think Carol put it best, is a disruption. And within this disruption, we have to understand that kind of, in a way, kind of ruins structure and ruins routine. The idea of getting up in the morning and following the morning routine, I mean, that kind of has gone out the window. So I think for me, my experience with my children is again, finding that structure again that would have been there by school. So, you know, getting up in the morning, starting the routine, but then likewise in terms of just keeping everything at a set time, for example, you know, as to when you log in for school, you know, how, you know, working through your subjects properly, taking proper notes. So the challenge for me really has been, and again, getting to your question as well too, the challenge has been really the idea of how do we create curriculum or create programs that are going to help children become autonomous learners and become independent learners. Because what's happening now is that we don't have the same support structures as having our teachers in school. We don't have teaching assistants, even the peers, you know, which is a big thing as far as kids when they study. So I think the main thing is that as far as what we can start thinking of as far as parents, as far as educators and men as well, is looking at some sort of program that allows our kids to not only do some self-introspection in terms of to understand how they learn, because everyone learns differently, but also in terms of something that will set something up that will allow our children so that they themselves will be self-motivated so that they can learn on themselves, by themselves. So what this means is we have different kids. So for example, my son, my youngest son, is somebody who wants to basically, Daddy, I need help with this, and I need you by my side. So one of the things we had to do with that was almost like wean him off the idea of, okay, I'm here working in the office, you're there working at your desk. What I want you to do is do your work. If you make mistakes, you make mistakes, but let's take it up in the end. All I'm trying to do at that point is foster a sense of independence so that he gets into the idea of, again, because we don't know when we're coming out this pandemic, gets into the idea of do your work as if you were at school, because I'm not in school with you, it wouldn't be typical to be in school. So I think one of the main things that we can do is the idea is support our children, but at the same time, it may not be a time in which we have to, you know, kind of hold their hands and guide them through. We have to become stronger parents in the sense of, you know, allowing them to make mistakes, but at the same time, play the part of the teacher and correct those mistakes after. Because at that time, again, what we want to do is foster the independence, because the reality is as our children get older, particularly into post-secondary education, they're going to have to learn their independent skills. So I think that's one of the things that we can do mostly that will kind of, again, bridge the gap in equity, not in the sense of curriculum that is, again, around, you know, Black people or the struggles that we have. That's going to be part of it, but I think the other part of it, again, is getting the structure in place.
Wow, that is heavy. I like that consistency, creating that pattern that the children can adjust to. I know one of my struggles was, okay, I walk in, they relax, you know, I'm like, okay, sit up, you.
Exactly.
And then they move to the chair, you know, and so creating that routine, that pattern that they can still learn, it's very important. And that actually takes me to professional development. Carol, I'm going to come to you on this one. You know, what COVID-19 pandemic, everything that's been going on, systemic racism, you know, what it has done for all of us is open our mindsets to start shifting away from traditional learning, traditional way of thinking, you know. So what professional learning opportunities do you think will serve both educators and students' needs in this day and time? Carol, you're mute.
Got it. You know, I think the obvious change, opportunity, or shift is the acceleration and enhancement of learning in virtual and remote formats. It's not new. COVID, though, is underscoring how instrumental it's ultimately going to be. There's lots of innovation in this space emerging. You know, and I, as someone who's been at this for a very long time, I look back, it was 10 years, maybe more, when post-secondary educators were freaking out over MOOCs, right? Oh, the MOOCs are coming, the massive open online courses were going to disrupt the system and really take away the underpinning of post-secondary education and how we traditionally think about credentialing. So this is not a new, this is not new. I think there are, out of this disruption, I think we're going to see 2 or 3 major shifts in focus around professional development. First of all, I think that we're going to see a move away from traditional credentialing as the kind of anchor of professional development, with the emergence of, for example, new formats in addition to new modalities. The new modality perhaps is virtual versus in person, or hybridity, where there are modalities that engage both. But the format, through micro-credentialing, moving away from the traditional course form in professional development to smaller, less intensive, or intensive, but shorter duration courses that are flexible, that are almost like Lego. We think of this as about Lego. So the professionals, mid-career professionals, will have the opportunity to assemble their learning around their own needs, rather than having a prescribed curriculum from an accrediting institution. And it might still come from an accrediting institution, but the ability for you to co-create your learning journey based on where you want to go in your career is really emerging. And I'll say that in Ontario in particular, the emergence of the micro-credential is a provincial priority by the Ministry of Colleges and Universities. And I think there's opportunity there. There's opportunity in that as we, perhaps become more comfortable with virtual formats, we become less bound by location. And so your access to a variety of learning opportunities might be substantially expanded, as you're not worried about getting there after work and engaging that way. But I think that the other piece of this that is concerning is that those modalities, the virtual modality in particular, does limit what has been a traditional force in professional development, and that's the connections. That's the informal and the serendipitous networking that happens when you take, in particular, mid-career professionals and put them all in a room, all from different backgrounds, and they have the opportunity to engage in person and explore connections and share experiences. And so more than ever, I think that, my experience in post-secondary right now, which may come back to in terms of what students are concerned about, we really do have to be very, very deliberate, I think, more deliberate than ever, about how we connect to one another through mechanisms such as mentoring in these more deliberate ways, because I think I think there's a risk that it's not going to happen spontaneously as it has through sort of traditional forms of professional development that we've relied on in the past. So I think there's some opportunities here, but very, very critical to remain mindful of how we're going to supplement perhaps the fragmentation in the interpersonal piece of moving careers forward, supporting one another, and growing that way.
I completely see where you're going with that. Co-creating your learning journey with the students, getting everybody involved. One of the things that worry me with this virtual learning is the young generation already, they're so used to using their phone for everything. They hardly even communicate, which also gets me, worried about their health, total wellness. And so I will come to you and I will say, of course, I know as a teacher, many teachers, as a parent, everybody's been describing their experience as crisis. Many indicate being so stressed now more than ever. I hear a lot, I can't sleep. How can we try to make sure that, we take care of ourselves and make the best of this situation?
Right, so that's such an important question because we all are dealing with a big disruption in our lives. And as difficult as it is for us as adults, the kids are also going through that. We see it in the classroom. We see that the kids they've gone through a very, I would say, traumatic time this past few months, because the disruption in March and continuous disruption even up till now, with the change of schedules, the change of integration into school, it's an upheaval of different dimensions, and we're seeing it in the classrooms with heightened anxiety and kids showing signs of stress. So I think that it's so important for us to all look at the big picture and see that we are in a pandemic. Many of us, most people, have never lived through a pandemic. Only a few, maybe a tiny fraction of people who have lived through a pandemic that are still here. And so we have to ask ourselves, what is the most important thing right now in order to get us through the pandemic and to be intact at the end of this pandemic? And so I, as an educator, and many educators as well, believe that this year is exceptional. And so our priorities are a bit different. Our focus is a bit different. We are trying to take care of the emotional well-being of the students in front of us first before anything else. So curriculum will take a backseat at this point. Pedagogy is not the same this year. We need to make sure that our kids they're in a space where they can learn, because student achievement can't happen when emotional well-being is not prioritized. So that's the first thing. We also, as parents, have to realize that, you know what, our kids are human beings, and that they can feel like what Charmaine said. Sometimes, without even knowing it, they look at us and absorb our anxiety and our stress without even knowing that that's what's happening. I know that with my last child, she started having a lot of nightmares, and she would wake up in the middle of the night and come to my room. And that didn't used to happen before. And we would talk about what was causing those nightmares. And sometimes, you know, we'll get down to the point where she's like, you know, she's worried. She was particularly more worried about COVID-19, about bringing it home and spreading it to grandma, because my mom lives with me at the moment, and she hears on the news how older people are more susceptible. So she had that worry in the back of her mind, and we talked through it. And so an important thing for us as parents and as educators is to model what we want our kids to see. That, okay, we're going through a difficult time, but there are things that we can do. There are things that are under our control that we can take care of. Make sure we're following the rules about sanitization, social distancing, trying to boost our immune system, doing what we can as much as we can. After we've done all that, we really don't have control over anything else, right? But we need to think about what we can do and what makes a difference. And so emotional well-being is a priority for educators across the board. This year, we are prioritizing that more than ever. We're teaching kids how to cope with their stress and how to live through these trying times. I also want to say that we need to celebrate our little successes, right? We need to every day that passes, there will be one challenge or the other, but let's not focus on all the things that didn't go right. Let's see the silver lining. Even though it's a time of upheaval, what have we been able to get out of it, right? And so people have taken time to spend more time with their families this time when kids were at home. Skill sets, some people learned something new. Kids are able to actually explore much more than they would have if they were in classrooms. So let's keep that in mind. Let's focus on our small successes, see the silver lining, and focus on our mental health. It's so important, so critical. As parents, as educators, we need to model self-care as well, right? Because you can't pour from an empty cup. You have to first take care of yourself so that you can take care of the students or the children that are in our care. So mental health is so important this year. We're focusing on that. First of all, if we don't get through all the strands of science, that's okay, as long as we get through this pandemic, because it's a ripple effect. Teachers know that this year is different. So for example, I have a grade 9 class, and half of their grade 8 year, they didn't quite learn as much as they should have. So I understand that as a teacher who's teaching a grade 9 class, my expectations are different this year. And so I'm taking the time to do diagnostic assessments to figure out where they are at and what they have learned and what they haven't. I can't assume, as in previous years, that they have learned something, right? And so all teachers will do that. So I think that we need to, take a step back and see a bigger picture and say, you know what? We'll do the best we can with what we have. We just need to get through this pandemic intact, right? With our mental state intact. So I think that's the focus for the year.
Absolutely. Well said. My God, you touched a whole lot of points. Mental health, taking care of ourselves, the children, the teacher, the parents. I think you really covered it in depth. While we are talking about the parents, Charmaine, I'm going to come to you with what families need. And I know Ada touched on it a little bit, but I would like for you to jump in on that one as well. And think about, this is crisis, really. Yeah. And when people say we are going through crisis, I don't think that it's they're exaggerating. So what do you think that families need at this time?
It's a very interesting question. I mean, we think back to March when the kids were so excited to go on March break and didn't realize that March break would probably be 6 months later. I think what families need, I don't think it's a one size fits all. I think families need to look at what they did back in March, April, and May and what worked, and figure out what didn't work. And that's not about failure. That's about figuring out what didn't work and then realigning that. So something as simple as, if you went out for, dinner every Friday night, maybe bringing that into the family now, and instead of going out, having a family dinner. I know for myself, I can say we have spent a lot more family quality time. You talk about having a teenager and, at our table, we're having more dinners together, no phones, which is a hard thing for the older one not to have his phone beside him. But we're having a lot more discussions. And I feel like those discussions and those interactions with your children, yes, we had them before, but I think they're more meaningful now because there is so much going on. So they are asking questions. They don't seem to be as anxious, or when they are, they're willing to talk about it. I think families need to take stock into how they're feeling as parents. As parents, we are taking on many more roles, taking nothing away from the educators and the teachers, but there are a lot of parents who are becoming teachers. So they are working from home and having children who are either learning from home or going off to school. So I think parents are wearing many more hats. I think there's a lot more stress. So I think talking about mental health for each other and checking in with each other, we can't do it all. We do need to come together as a community and check in on each other and make sure we're all doing okay. So I think your question about what do we need to do, I think it's multifaceted. I think we need to figure out what worked and what didn't and make those adjustments. We need to check in on each other and also take care of ourselves.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm looking at the Q&A. See a couple of comments. That was a great comment from the first speaker. Okay, I'm just scrolling through to see questions. I see a question. Cleaning is one thing, but disinfection is another. How can we ensure the school is being disinfected often enough? Anybody feel free to jump in on that question, please. And I think this perhaps is coming from a parents wondering, yes, we need to clean, we need to disinfect. What can we do as a parent to ensure that the school is doing what they're saying to us that they are doing?
So at my school, I teach at a high school, and we do have a team of caretaking staff that, caretaker staff, that actually, I have to say this, and the truth is that in my school is cleaner today than I have ever seen it since I started teaching there. And that's just because they're taking the time to actually do the cleaning as often as they need to, especially because it's a high school, and so there are cohorts of students who are coming in at different days. So between those cohorts, when they leave in the afternoon, the cleaning staff are all over the place, cleaning and making sure that it's ready for the next cohort of kids who come in the following day. In between teachers, sometimes teachers share classrooms. And so when one teacher leaves, as soon as they're leaving, the caretaker staff is cleaning, disinfecting. And we're also making it a habit for the students as they walk in through the door every day. First, they take a hand sanitizer as they walk into school. And then when they're getting into their classrooms, because in between when they come into school and when they get to their classrooms, they might have gone to, let's say, the washroom or whatever, as they walk into the class, they also sanitize as well. So from my own personal experience, I think that the cleaning protocols, sanitization protocols are in place. And it's just a lot of work for the caretaker staff. They're doing a lot, but everybody's trying their best.
Thank you. I know my big worry when my kids come back from school, my twins, is their jackets. I'm thinking, where did you drop your jacket? Should I take the jacket inside? Should I keep it in the garage? You know, anybody have any tips how to manage that? That's concern. Anybody want to chip in on that? Why I also add, okay, go ahead.
Sure. So I mean, I think there's, generally speaking, as far as just, good sanitary habits, one of the things that we could try and do is with your clothes, for example, when you're coming in, Charmaine has a routine sometimes of just drop it at the door, right? So that means like, okay, the jacket is there, you were on the bus, particularly for my older one, he's on transit, drop it right at the door. There's a bag there, and the bag goes straight to the laundry room. I mean, sometimes it feels like we're a little bit, I laugh sometimes, think it's a bit overboard, but at the same time, we can't, because here's the reality is that I have a neighbor 2 doors down who passed away from COVID. I have friends who have lost, family. I have family who's lost family. So the point is, again, is that we don't know really in terms of, what is happening at a microscopic level. So I think the best possible thing to do is in terms of preventing it from kind of spreading into the household is dealing with upon entrance, and then likewise, regular washing of hands and keeping, a clean working space. Another thing that we do is cleaning of doorknobs. Charmaine's laughing because she says, I just said we did it, but she does it. So cleaning up all the doorknobs in the house and the cupboards and all these sort of things. I mean, all these little things kind of help stop the spread.
Thank you for that. Carol, I have a question here for you. Sarah asks, are there any specific things that you've seen in some of the new online learning developments in formats and courses that are specifically addressing issues in diversity, inclusion, and equity in a positive way?
Yes. On the theme of making the best use possible of a crisis, viewing this and the change in the learning experience through the lens of equity, diversity, and inclusion, I think leads us to really explore what does open up. And notwithstanding the comments that are coming from these educators about emotional well-being as being the cornerstone of the possibility to learn, what we are seeing, and very clearly, and what is increasingly emergent in the research, is that virtual and remote environments can open opportunities for access, so that the principles around universal design, which is essentially a pedagogy that espouses, broad flexibility so that different learners with different styles and different orientations, different preferences, and different challenges in terms of access are more likely through a well-designed virtual experience to have the whole suite of options that are available so that the learning style and needs are met, at least partially. We do make an assumption, and certainly I have fielded many concerns from students and parents about going to virtual, going to remote learning, on the assumption that it is necessarily inferior. And I think that, again, thoughtful, deliberate approach opens up opportunities for different kinds of learning to take place. So there is some opportunity for access in general that engages equity and diversity. There's an interesting thread of research emerging. It isn't new to COVID, but it's again been really amplified through COVID, to ask the question whether or not virtual and remote environments can enhance equity, particularly in terms of race and gender, by removing the in-person, more salient markers of difference that trigger either overt or unconscious bias. So we're starting to see the emergence of that research to suggest that there are opportunities here to, again, I think on two counts, to disrupt the engagement that triggers bias through the remote platform. But the second part of it is that there's a lot of work being done in how we can use a virtual environment, in particular the capacity for asynchronous engagement, like a recorded engagement, as an instrument in supporting growth of the teacher in terms of their unconscious bias, having them re-examine what happened in a classroom, and through a guided process around anti-racism and gender equity, to have it used as a learning tool for them. What happened in this transaction? How was this biased or not? So there are opportunities, again, if we're deliberate and thinking about all of this through the lens of EDI, for us to take advantage, to learn, to grow personally, but to perhaps, again, disrupt what has been, destructive process, destructive and discriminatory practice as well.
That's good. Thank you so much. That's a great insight. Thank you for that, Carol. There's another question that I have here, and it's coming from Michelle. What is the school system, primary, high school, and post-secondary, doing for sustaining mental health for the students and the learners? Anybody feel free to.
Yeah, so I'm going to jump in there and say that the ministry actually does have a framework, Supporting Minds, where teachers are supposed to incorporate some kind of social emotional learning into the classrooms, especially now with the COVID-19 and all the anxiety associated with that. It is a protocol in place. There are documents, every school board has a version of it. But it's up to the individual teacher how they want to incorporate it into their own classrooms. And so for example, when I'm not teaching the course that I mentioned, which is a mindfulness course, which is focused solely on mindfulness and social emotional learning, I also incorporate some strategies from those courses into my other classes. So when I have my science class, two things that I've been doing are that we start off with a breathing exercise, just taking deep breaths with guided meditation track in the background. And that just calms the kids down before we even start the lesson. Something else that I've also done is that I do have a wellness calendar put up on my online platform so that every day when the kids log in, they see something that they think on, something positive, something uplifting, something that says, oh, that celebrates something. What have you achieved today? Or what did you do yesterday that you're proud of? Or something for them to actually move the attention to celebrate something. And so that's how I've been incorporating that. I've also tried to make my learning environment, whether online or in class, a safe, inclusive space. And I've let the kids know that we're all in this together. We're all learning together. There's nobody who's not learning something new at this point. We're trying to figure out the technology. We're trying to make sure the video has volume the same time. And we're trying to make sure that the kids can see my face, or when I'm trying to share a document. So they can see that I'm also trying to learn this, because I've never had to do as much as doing so many things at the same time. And so the path that we are on is a learner's path. So I say to them, we're all learning. And so let's share what we're learning together. And I've had like being online, it's so encouraging to see how the kids have actually started helping themselves. And so, for example, if a kid is using an iPhone and they want to upload an assignment with an iPhone. I don't have an iPhone. I can't tell you how to do that. But another kid who can, or who has done that before, would say, okay, miss, I can tell him how to do it. And I would say, okay, share your screen. And so that kid shares their screen. Everybody in the class is looking and watching the steps. And that has been so helpful, building a community of learners. And that does two things. It says to everybody, we're in this together and we got each other's back. And so nobody feels isolated or alone. Nobody feels like they can't say what their problems are, because maybe somebody else has the same problem, has been able to overcome it. So I think that whole nurturing environment where kids feel safe, able to see what's going on with them, and also being supportive. I might not have all the answers right at the time, but I can always say, I will get back to you. I'll find out and I'll get back to you. So every teacher in their role as an educator has a part to play in the mental health of the kids. And any little thing goes, I mean, don't ever take anything for granted. Just saying the child's name, checking up on them when they're not in class, or like when I noticed, for example, that a kid who was supposed to be online has gone off, and I call them later on after class and they say, miss, the internet in my building went down, or the Wi-Fi wasn't working and all that. And so we talk about it, and I say to them, well, remember, that happened to me the other day when I was home and I had to go unplug my modem and all that. So we share experiences. We know that it's a difficult time, challenging, but we're going to do the best we can, and we have each other's backs. I think that's most important.
Thank you so much. That we are in this together. I like that. That's really interesting, you know, seeing how the kids are stepping in to help themselves. Amazing. I think it speaks to something that Jeffrey said, letting the kids be on the driving seat as against us trying to help them. I have a question that I would like to ask here while we're talking about this family communication. And Jeffrey, I'll probably come to you about navigating challenges at work, because parents, now we have work to deal with, we have school, virtual or in-person learning to deal with as well. What do you think families need at this time, and how should we continue to work collaboratively with everybody?
Very good question. I mean, I think the key to a lot of this has to do with communication. I mean, communication at different levels as well too. And what I mean by that is that as parents, I mean, one of the things that we should be looking at doing is communicating to our children. And what I mean by that is not just in terms of, you know, us kind of setting our expectations or what we would like to see, but particularly in these times when there's so much anxiety and kids being away from friends and their peers and their teachers, we have to kind of listen to them and see what's happening. Because again, lot of young people are suffering from different types of anxiety, different types of mental issues. And I think what we have to do is listen to them and ask more questions, and also be able to recognize cues that they may be struggling with things. Again, from that end, there's the communication between us as parents, and then likewise to our spouses, our partners as well too. Just in terms of, again, getting back to the idea of, again, there's a loss of structure. So now I think, again, we have to kind of create that structure again. So for myself, I work from home primarily. COVID has changed my whole work life by the sense of that. Typically, when I'd be going out and servicing clients or meeting potential clients, I'm doing everything virtually and doing everything via email from home. Whereas my wife is still out. She's in the workplace. So we have to kind of coordinate as far as, in terms of when homework is being done, likewise in terms of communicating, in terms of how we're going to help our children in terms of, reviewing the homework, and likewise reviewing their schoolwork. And then obviously the other part of communication goes to from parent to teacher. I mean, the reality is that there's kind of this implicit partnership. We're partners, really. We're here, we're rearing our children, and teachers and educators are playing a very huge part in taking on this role, if you will, of a surrogate of some sort while they're in school or while they're in the school environment. So I think it's very big to, again, form a relationship with your teachers or with your children's teachers. I mean, high school, it gets a little trickier because there are more teachers involved, but I think having an open line of communication, and likewise, if there are questions, ask the questions. Again, I think Aoda made a good point as well, is that, teachers are human beings as well too. So the point is that all this that we're experiencing is new to them. And we have to take that in understanding that even though there may be challenges with their kids, but at the same time, they're having their own challenges as well too. So I think it's good to open the lines of communications between there as well. And then lastly, I think is this dealing with work, with your employer, pardon me. I think for people who are not entrepreneurs like myself, but in the workforce, whether it's corporate or wherever in the private sector they may be, it's important to kind of, again, whether it's your supervisor or your boss, having challenges as far as, like, again, getting home now at a certain time to be with your children, or for that matter, kind of working around your schedule. Again, depending on your job, it may not be as flexible, but I think that's also important as well, as far as ensuring that all lines of communications are open so that we can all kind of be successful in terms of what we're doing, and that likewise we're willing to listen as well as to give our own viewpoints on different facets of our children's education as well too.
Thank you so much for that. Charmaine, I'm going to come to you. Maybe you can help with this anonymous question. I think this is coming from a parent who said recently they got an email advising the kids' school, that in this kids' school, the student have COVID. And they were expecting the school to close, but it didn't. How should one handle this type of issues moving forward as a parent?
Sorry, I just didn't hear the last part of the question.
It said, how should one handle these types of issues moving forward? If your school sent you an email, your child's school sent an email saying somebody have COVID, and of course, you expect the school will close. But the next day they're saying, it's okay, kids can still come to school. As a parent, how would you handle situations like this?
Yes, I think first and foremost, I would say to not panic. And I say that because that would be the first thing I would do. With every institution, whether it's a corporate environment or an academic environment, because of this pandemic, everybody has had to come up with a protocol, so some type of document. And I think what really hasn't happened, we talked a lot about communication. So just sending out that email without any context doesn't allow you to not freak out and have your own anxiety as a parent. I think what should be happening is more communication should happen as to, was it within the class? Was it in the greater part of the school? Is it by association? On all of the websites, I mean, my youngest one is in elementary, and on their school, there's an advisory page that allows you to see how many cases in that school and if the classrooms are closed or not. It's interesting that I bring that up because at my workplace, it's a small office. Many of the women and the parents both fathers and mothers, they are checking that website every day, sometimes 3 times a day. And I'm not sure that's helping, because if the school does have an incident, they will reach out to you. So I think going back to your question is, the first thing is I think that particular parent should reach out to the school and find out what the school's protocol is. What does that mean for them? What should they be doing so that they can better equip themselves with the information and then make the necessary decisions, because they may want to pull their child out for a certain period of time.
That's a good one. Thank you. I have a question, and Michelle, thank you for that question. I was actually also thinking about how people from the disability community is coping. So this question is, how is the online learning being customized for people with different types of disabilities, i.e. learning cognitive, visually impaired, hearing impaired, I'll add blindness and all of that. Who wants to take that?
Okay, so I personally don't have a classroom that has any students who have disabilities, but I do know that most students who will have disabilities will have an IEP, which is an individualized education plan, and that provides for them access to special devices so that they can actually learn. And so in that case, they would have access to a special education teacher that is assigned to them. And they would also have access to devices that enable them to do the learning. And so in that, I mean, it is, I think, an equitable system where kids with learning needs and disabilities are catered to. And in my school, there are kids that have special devices for different disabilities. I personally haven't had a kid in my class, but I know that it exists and that there are teachers who have the qualifications to take care of those students.
If I could add to that, in post-secondary, that's also the case, that students would register and work with a learning accessibility specialist to ensure that we understand what their accommodation is, whether they're doing their learning in person or online. It could include access to a special device, or more time to do tests. There's a whole range of accommodations depending on the learner's circumstance. There's also the guidelines of the Aoda Guidelines, and I'm madly trying to think of what that acronym stands for, but it is certainly the guide, it's Ontarians with Disabilities Act, which compels us to ensure that for example, our websites, our online platforms do comply with specific accessibility guidelines. And so we are, again, compelled. Thank you very much. Accessibility Ontario's. Thank you, Michelle. So we do operate under that directive of the government.
Thank you, Carol. I have another question here. Geoffrey, what do you recommend as the best ways to ease concerns about school during COVID-19? Geoffrey.
Well, I mean, again, there really isn't, I would say, a cookie-cut answer to that. I mean, I think it depends on the situation. I mean, there are concerns, basically, if you're talking about concerns for your children, again, the best thing I could recommend is to talk to your kids. And likewise, again, is that we have to keep a very kind of positive outlook, I believe, in terms of how we deal with our children. I think we've already touched about this already in terms of, again, not passing on your own anxieties. The reason being simply is that what we don't want to happen is to kind of, elevate anxiety in that sense, and elevate fears, right? What we have to do is kind of talk it out. And again, as I said before, I don't necessarily believe in necessarily walking, again, for my own children, I should say, I don't necessarily believe in terms of me kind of like walking my children through everything. But what I do with them is that there's constant interaction with them, right? In the sense of that, not only asking the questions, but likewise, there's time for us to go and review the homework or review whatever work that's being done at that specific time of day that we set to schedule that. It's again, there's no distractions. You know, turn off your cell phone, put your cell phone in the other room, sit down and devote 100% of time to your children. Because the reality is that when they go to school or speaking to their peers, those other influences come in and you know, almost create a negative light in terms of, you know, a more, you know, pessimistic light, I guess you can say, in terms of what our outlook on COVID. So again, I think the main thing again is this, again, keep the lines of communication open and be actively involved, not necessarily in doing the homework, but actively involved in terms of ensuring that you know what's happening with their work. I'll give you an example of what I do with my younger son as well too. One of the things that we do is we have, like, you know, our reading. We have a book that he has to read. So one of the ways that I kind of engage him and also kind of to monitor him to make sure he's reading what he says he's reading is I'll read the book. Like, I'll read 10 pages ahead of him, and then now he has to take the book and read. So then after that we have a discussion. All these sort of things I think kind of fortify family relationships so that it kind of lowers A, the anxiety and the fear, and B, boosts up the potential for you guys to have open communication so that you can resolve these situations as they come.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Interesting you mentioned make sure, you know, the phone is not there. One of the things that I personally struggle with this period is how do you discipline your child? There's a whole lot of emotional things going on. So you say no phone, and then they still keep the phone. And so you're wondering, should I take it away? And if I take it away, how do they cope and all of that? Anybody have tips there? How do we manage? How do we balance that particular challenge that I'm sure most parents are also experiencing?
Well, I think I'm just going to say you just have to pick your battles, right? And it's the same as a parent, as a teacher. Sometimes you ask yourself, okay, this path I'm going down, is it worth the energy and the emotional stress that it will put on after that? So if something is important enough because I've mentioned it over and over and I want to make a point and I want that point to stick, I could decide to do something that will hurt a bit, you know what I mean? But if it's a little irritations that I can overlook, because really we are also, everybody has things they're dealing with at this point, I would overlook it. So I think it's about knowing your child, knowing what battles to pick, and kind of balancing it out. Because at the end of the day, some of these things are also expressions of stress. You know, when they're defiant, sometimes it's not because they really want to, it's maybe the way they're expressing the stress they're feeling at that time. And so that's how I would try to see if it's a battle that I want to pick at that time. And maybe if that time is not even, if the emotions are heated at that time, that might not be the time to like take away the phone. It might be later on after you talked about it, so they understand that you're acting not out of anger, but because you want to instill a lesson or teach a life skill. And so I think that's how I would handle it.
Thank you for that, Ada. Really appreciate that. Your namesake, Ada, you be there. Question: how do you deal with students if one student tests positive?
So I think there are protocols in place from public health, telling the schools what to do in the case of an outbreak, or even if somebody is sick. I know that the first thing is to actually make sure that there's contact tracing. So if your child is in a class with somebody else who has tested positive, the school and public health will inform you. And usually they would advise to isolate for a period of time, depending on if you're starting to show symptoms or not. And so if after isolating a few days there are no symptoms, there are guidelines as to when you can come back to school. Those will be made clear to you as a parent, so there's no guesswork or second guessing. There will be a letter that you will be receiving telling you what to do. The teacher as well has to isolate as well. And that's the thing about the online part of education right now, is it absolutely helps a seamless transition, so that if a student or a teacher is sick, then everybody in that cohort moves online because they have to be at home. And so that kind of minimizes the disruption in education, because your child is home, but they're still receiving some instruction from their teacher. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Enabling change. Carol, I'm going to ask you this question. Teachers will be more successful at remote instruction if they believe they can do it. Teachers and educators, I believe. How should we enable this change for everyone?
Well, you know, I'm going to pick up again on the theme around stress and anxiety and mental health. And I think that what we're seeing, and I know it's not unique, is that first posture around wellness and self-care is actually the gateway to facilitating the acquisition of the skills that are necessary to migrate into different forms of learning. I hope it doesn't sound trite, but it's a very real effect that the stress of feeling the urgency of having to up your skills is very real, on top of all of the other stresses of the whole circumstance. So I do think, to reiterate Aoda's comments around this, first posture is to support educators around wellness and self-care, and that community of learning and sharing is vital. And it's also, again, in the environment where everyone has retreated and is working remotely, is at great risk. So creating both the formal supports, you know, in post-secondary environments, there are structures in the institution that are dedicated entirely to supporting educators in developing their tools, developing their craft as educators. Helping them understand what is good pedagogy, what is balanced, universally designed pedagogy in a remote environment, and making the change, supporting them in making that change. That's an incredible advantage that may not be replicated throughout our entire educational system, but in universities and colleges, centers for teaching and learning are dedicated just to that. Having that community of scholarship, of practice with your colleagues is instrumental. And again, focusing, a really important part of accomplishing the change is staying focused on mental health and wellness, because as much as our students, and boy, are our students ever feeling the stress of migrating into this whole new way of learning, the teachers are too. And so their capacity to reach out to one another is vital. And I know that we have worked hard, and I don't think that Sheridan is unique in the system. We've worked hard in creating online communities to share practices, to help one another, pass along tips around how to animate a PowerPoint. I mean, there's simple things in some cases, and some are more sophisticated, but having that resource is critical, and the connection with the practitioners and with each other, and the support to just say, you know what, it's okay that you don't know how to do this. And you know, I laughed at the example of, well, I don't know how to do this application on an iPhone, but someone else in the group will know. And I can't overstate how much of that is going on right now. And it's twofold benefit. On one hand, you're getting your technical challenge resolved, or your pedagogical challenge. How do I help my learners with this kind of problem in this different learning environment? But you're building the community, you're reinforcing the community that is more important than ever now. You know, I would say that both for the students and for faculty, for teachers, if there's a single point of concern over what this is this current circumstance and the move largely to remote virtual learning is the lack of community, is the physical contact, the buzz of being together in the hallways, in, you know, face to face, grabbing a coffee, whatever it looks like in the schoolyards and on the campuses. This fuels us in ways that, you know, we're in education for a reason, and I think part of it is, you know, is about that, and it's gone missing. And that has created a great deal of difficulty. So I think that in terms of enabling change, not overlooking that really emotional, psychological component is part of the facilitator. It's really an enabler for supporting people with the change.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Carol. Why we are still talking about change and sustainability. Charmaine, I'll probably come to you, and this question I will want everybody to chime in as well. You know, so remote learning is becoming the norm, and I think we've touched on that extensively. Some parents and students are overwhelmed. I'm lucky. I have my two big boys that help the twins. So I'm not really, you know, feeling this stress that much. But so many other people don't. They really, you know, they are now the teacher partly. How do we remain engaged and at the same time continue to learn, absorb this new norm that we are all adjusting?
Well, that's a very interesting question. And I mean, I'm sure we could speak for hours if we were to get all the participants to chime in on all the different types of little things that come into play in the day. I mean, I think the traditional of the children going off to school and the parents or the caregivers going off to work, that is now disbanded. And so now you have a nucleus now where you have children who might get up late and log in, or they get up in their pajamas, they've hardly brushed their teeth, they're coming down, they're logging into Google Classrooms, and then they begin. I personally cannot say how it's been, because for me, I've still been at work. My husband has been the one taking care of it at home. But what I have seen and heard is having some sort of structure. Not being too rigid with your children, but having some sort of structure. And the school day doesn't just start and end like it used to. It doesn't start at 8:30 and finish at 2:30. It now can actually go way beyond that, which now kind of creeps into the family time and your time that you do other things in the evening, because the student might not have gotten that work or understood it, and now you're having to get the parent, or let's say the parent who has come home and has a fresh, no stress and fresh, to be able to help the child through whatever is going on. So I think firstly you have to find a new norm and realize that what was there before isn't today. I think you have to figure out what works for your child, and every child is different. Some have excelled. I've heard friends and family say their children have excelled with the online learning, where others who did really well in the school system now have not done well online. So I think it's not about failure or excelling, but it's about figuring out what works.
Absolutely. I have about 3 questions that I will want us to address as well. And let me ask one of them. Somebody said, what do best practices look like in general? And so if you're addressing the change and sustainability, please, if you can also talk about that. Thank you. Who wants to jump in?
Okay, just to add on to what Charmaine talked about, every child is different. Every child learns differently. I know that for the online component, some students struggle with it, even though you would assume they are the digital age, they have access to their phones, they use it all the time. But when it comes to learning on that platform, some students actually struggle more. And so as teachers, we have to be flexible in the things that when we deliver curriculum, even when we do it online. One thing that we have to also be mindful of is the amount of time that our kids are spending in front of a screen, because they're learning, and also because after they finish learning, their downtime also involves a screen. So there's hours on end being in front of a screen, which is not healthy, right? And so sometimes what I'm beginning to incorporate within my classroom, at times, even if we're online, when I say to them, now you can shut your camera off, I want you to go to a textbook, because they do have textbooks. And I say, let's go on that page, and I'm going to give you 10 or 15 minutes to read 2 pages, and we'll be back on, just to give the eyes a break. Because at the end of the day, really, eventually, all of this will catch up, I think, because eye problems are going to be on the rise, I assume, because I already know, and I wear glasses, that I get a headache every day, because I'm in front of a screen, the blue light and all that intense light, you know. And so going forward, I think we have to find new ways of being and new ways of learning. I mean, technology is here to stay. Things are not going to go back to the way they were before COVID. I don't think that everything will go back exactly how it was. I think that it is transformative, this period, and a lot more things will be done online. I, for one, am beginning to actually cut down on paper handouts. And so a lot of things I'm giving out online, tests and quizzes, some of them are online. And so we're cutting down on paper use. I don't see that going back to pre-COVID times, even after the pandemic. And so we just have to adapt, right? Adapt to the learning structure. Friends of mine who teach elementary have mentioned the learning gap that has started to happen with children who over this long period of time have been from at home, but also haven't had as much access to other support from parents, because maybe parents are working 2 jobs or more and can be there to help with homework. And so the inequity is increasing. There's a learning gap that is beginning to show. And I think it's something that we actually have to address. And so not every child can thrive as an online learner, and we just have to recognize that and make decisions based on that. And so as parents, we have to make the difficult decision that if my child is not thriving online, maybe they're better served in school. And I know that that can be a difficult decision for parents, but you have to take it individual child to see what their strengths and their needs are, and to see where they will thrive the most, and do the best you can, and be kind and patient, you know, patient and kind to ourselves, because I think we also are very critical, self-critical about ourselves, second guessing our decisions. You know, you're trying to do the best for your child, and I think that as long as you are trying to do the best that you can, it's okay to, you know, to make mistakes, because sometimes we're human and sometimes we'll make mistakes. But for children, not every child thrives online. I can tell you that for sure.
Yeah, thank you for that. There is one question that I think we will probably take. I'm looking at the time, and if we can perhaps just 1 minute, please, so we can get to the 2 questions that we have from our participants. One says, as a work from home parent with pre-virtual schooling kids under 10 years, we have lots of anxiety as our kids only just got assigned to classroom after about 3 weeks of resumption. So they are basically feeling that their kids are, you know, may lag behind. And the question is, I think, is their fears valid? They're worried that their kids may lag, you know, far behind in their class.
So the reality is that, yes, because of all the changes in the system, and also because every board did things differently, we find that there are kids who didn't get teachers assigned for a long time. And those 3 weeks of not learning is substantial, right? But I think the important thing to note is that everybody recognizes that these times are not normal. And so eventually when they do get the teacher, that teacher will have to spend some time trying to catch them up. So I don't think that as parents, I mean, you can do what you can within your powers if you have access to maybe a tutor, if you can, or if you have access to supplementary material that you can work with your kids with, you can do that. But if you have no access to those, or you can't afford it, and then I think you should be rest assured that every educator who has that child will realize that it's not that child's fault that they didn't get 3 weeks of instruction. And so they will have to do what they can to catch the child up. I know that before in March, when school shut down, a lot of things didn't happen. This is not a usual year. So the EQAO, which is the assessment that happens in grade 10 for all high school students, the English assessment, it didn't happen because of COVID, right? Community hours are usually required from every graduating student, 40 hours of community service. Well, that requirement was waived as well. So we're not in a static world. Things are flexible. Adjustments can be made, recognizing that these times are not normal. And so I don't think you should worry too much about learning loss at this time, because eventually they will recoup as much as the teachers can do that. Because worrying about it is not going to change anything, and you're not the reason that it happened, you know. And so you can't take on that responsibility and blame yourself for it, or worry too much about it. Your kid will be hopefully in good hands eventually, and the system adjusts. The system will adjust to it. This year, they're already talking about not having exams, okay? So there's discussions about, is it valid to have exams this year with everything happening? Well, we might not end up having exams. And so that's how the system will compensate for all of these disruptions. So I don't think as parents, we need to take all that burden on ourselves.
That's true. Thank you so much. I'm looking at the time. We have 4 minutes. And I would really like for everybody to chime in here and call to action. I like to have that aspect, and I will start with you, Charmaine. Call to action statements, if you may.
So I'd like to keep it simple and brief, and really just say, take care of yourselves, take care of your family, but don't forget to check in on others.
Oh, absolutely love it. Jeffrey.
I think one of the things that we have to focus on is, again, creating some sort of structure, building good routines for our young people that they can follow. And as I said, communication, I think, is really key between all parties to ensure that our kids are not only successful, but that they're actually thriving. And so that we can actually identify their strengths and their weaknesses better, and then we can support them better as parents.
Absolutely. Carol.
Similar theme. You know, those in the post-secondary world know that mental health has been a concern for many, many years. It is escalating. It's been on the rise. Pre-COVID, certainly, COVID hasn't simply emerged mental health as an issue. For older learners, we've been tracking mental health challenges for many years. So, you know, I think that COVID certainly exacerbates the anxiety, the stress, some of the mental health challenges that our learners have been dealing with. And so the call to action is to remain focused on, again, wellness, to ensure that there is ample access to the supports that learners need for us as educators, and as parents, to be ready to engage the resources that are available in your system, lowering any stigma around it. I mean, it really is, if there's anything I can report on some kind of upside, is that I know that our learning community is really, really embracing the mental health supports that we've put in place. The threshold for accessing them has lowered. They're online. It's almost easier to just say, oh, I am stressed out. I am going to hit that link and make an appointment and talk to someone. So I think that would be call to action is mental health, wellness, taking care of that.
Thank you. Ada, can you give me 10 seconds, please? Go ahead.
Okay, so take care of yourself so that you can take care of others. Don't sweat the small stuff. That's it. 10 seconds.
Don't sweat the small stuff. Love it. This has been awesome. Recently, my son said, Mom, I cannot believe we are living through these surreal moments where everyone is important, where health professionals, teachers, grocery workers, and all of us have to play a role to make sure we all stay alive. And then he added silly him, I will exaggerate these experiences to my children. He means my future grandchildren. And I looked at him and I said, son, no history book will be able to capture the extraordinary times that we are all living through today. But it got me thinking, how will history describe your role? Will you be on the side of resilience, courage, among those that find a way to become more creative, to progress toward the finish line? Ambi Beaufort said, to get to the finish line, you will have to try lots of different paths. I know this life we are living through, it's not easy. But by sharing our lived experiences and nudging each other forward, we will come out on the other side stronger than we are today. I hope today's session have been enlightening as well as inspiring. As always, I encourage you to be resilient in a positive way. Whatever sacrifice we are making today, remember, we are doing this for our safety and for the next generation. To all of you wonderful, knowledgeable panelists, thank you for your commitment. You have provided, I am sure, us with exceptional tools that will benefit us and help us to continue to navigate and adjust to the new learning ways. So thank you. All of you remarkable people that joined us this evening, Friday evening, thank you. On behalf of BMI, we appreciate you. Our next session still on COVID-19 and the pandemic and the classroom is on October 30th. Please stay tuned. For details, visit our website, social media pages. This is your moderator, Evangeline Chima. Until next time, thank you so much. Don't forget, hashtag Black Mentorship Inc. Stay safe, everybody, and let's keep forging forward. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Evangeline.